Would you believe me if I told you this is a keto, low-carb artichoke and cheese Borreca pie? It looks absolutely phenomenal because it is phenomenal. And unbelievably, it is low-carb keto. Sally that girl in the kitchen. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sally That Girl in the Kitchen. In today's episode, I'm going to teach you how to make a keto low-carb artichoke and cheese Borreca pie, also known as a tapada. So, borrecas, delicious pastry filled with delicious fillings, usually potato cheese, spinach cheese, eggplant cheese, or just eggplant, tomato, onions, different vegetables, different fillings. But this time, we're going to be making this dough keto, low carb. We're going to be using a low carb flour to make the dough, and we're going to bake it in pie form, just like many of the other tapadas that I've made before. But this one's going to be low carb. We're not using regular flour, but when you see this tapada, you're not going to believe that this is a low carb pie. It is absolutely delicious. And of course, when I use the word pie, it can lead people to think that this is sweet. No, these pies are savory. Tapadas are always filled with savory fillings, and they're just absolutely phenomenal. And the sky's the limit when it comes to fillings. So this artichoke version, I know you're gonna love, but you can use this same dough and use the filling from any of my other tapadas and fill it with that. And you are gonna love all of them. So I am super excited to teach you how to make it. So let's not wait another second and let's get started. For the filling part of today's recipe, you will need 4 cans of chopped artichokes, drained. So the weight is 56 ounces net weight and 33.6 ounces once the artichokes have been drained. You'll also need 16 ounces of shredded mozzarella cheese, 6 ounces of grated Parmesan cheese, half a teaspoon of salt, and 8 large eggs. And for the keto low-carb dough part of today's recipe, you will need 16 ounces of keto wheat flour minus 3 or 4 tablespoons that you'll later use for dusting the dough when we're rolling it out, 3/4 teaspoon of salt, 3/4 cup avocado oil, 3/4 cup of warm water, 1 large egg for an egg wash, and either sesame seeds or grated Parmesan cheese for sprinkling on top. That is a matter of taste and a personal choice, so I'll leave that up to you. You will also need a fork, a serving spoon and a serving fork, a long thin knife, a large bowl and a medium-sized bowl, a couple of wet measuring cups, some measuring spoons, a 9 by 13 inch baking dish, a cutting board and a knife, a bowl and a pastry brush, a rolling pin, wax paper, some paper towel, and some oven mitts. So now that we have all of our ingredients and tools together, let's get started. So we're going to start with our fillings. So I purchased these recipe ready chopped artichoke hearts, but I like to drain them and then chop them a bit more because I want my pieces really small. So what I do is I drain it well, make sure I eliminate all that water, and then I just come over and give them a nice rough chop right on top because I really want to get those pieces nice and small. And then I'm just going to repeat that same process with all of the cans of artichoke so that we have that beautiful mound of chopped artichoke in small pieces. So now just set that aside for a moment, and then you're going to bring over your large bowl. And into your large bowl, you want to crack 8 large eggs. So once you get those eggs cracked, you just want to beat them well with a fork. Add in half a teaspoon of salt, then go ahead and just stir that in with the same fork. And then right into this, we're going to add 6 ounces of grated Parmesan cheese. It's not the whole bottle, I removed 2 ounces. And then 16 ounces of shredded mozzarella cheese. And then once that's in, I'm just going to grab a serving spoon and I'm going to incorporate these ingredients. I'm going to mix it well and just make sure that that egg and that salt is well incorporated and that all of the ingredients are well combined. You'll notice I just scrape down the sides of the bowl and just kind of move everything around so that the egg gets well distributed. So now, once that is well incorporated, you're just going to bring over your chopped artichoke hearts. You're going to add all of those in, and then you're going to repeat the same process using that same serving spoon. Just go in there and mix it really well until everything is well distributed. So now I'm going to go ahead and preheat my oven to 350 degrees, making sure I have a rack placed in the center, and I'm going to move on to working on my dough. So I'm grabbing my medium-sized bowl. I'm using keto wheat baking flour, and you'll notice the flour itself is dairy. I'm not adding any dairy to it, but it is a dairy flour. And this is a 16-ounce bag, which is 1 pound, and I'm going to be using the entire bag. I'm not going to measure it out. I'm just going to pour it in, and I'm just going to save 3 or 4 tablespoons in the bottom of the bag. I'm not going to pour that in, and just pour in the rest. We are going to be using this little touch of keto flour that I left here in the bag a little bit later when rolling out our dough. And as you saw, I just eyeballed it, but if you're more comfortable measuring it out, you can measure it out. Just save 3 or 4 tablespoons. Then add in 3/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to be using my trusty fork. This is just a serving fork, but it's what my grandmother always traditionally used when making borreca dough. And I'm just going to incorporate that salt really well, just want it well distributed. Then I'm going to measure 3/4 cup avocado oil. I'm using a healthier oil. My grandmothers would have used a vegetable oil, but we're making this healthier after all. So I'm going to use avocado oil, and it's going to work perfectly. And then you just want to go ahead and pour in that entire 3/4 cup. And then once that's in, you're just going to use your fork to make sure that the flour absorbs all of that oil. So when you make a regular borreca dough, you're going to form sandy pebbles by doing this motion. But in this case, with this keto baking flour, what you're going to get is almost the consistency of clay. It's perfect. That's what you're looking for. So it is a little bit different if you've ever made my homemade Borreca Tapada dough before. It does look a little bit different, but don't worry. This is what you want. It's got almost like a clay feel to it. So once you've incorporated that oil and that flour really well by scraping down the sides of the bowl, making sure it's well absorbed, you're going to measure out 3/4 cup of water, and then you're going to warm that in the microwave. Just warm to the touch, about maybe 40 seconds, depending on the strength of your microwave. Then you want to pour about half of that in, and you're just going to use that same serving fork, and you're going to mix it in, and you will see how quickly this mixture starts to absorb that liquid. This keto low carb flour really needs this moisture, so it definitely calls for a touch more oil and a touch more water than a regular dough would, and it is going to turn out perfectly. So see, all that water that I poured in has already been absorbed into the dough. So then once you see that, then you go ahead and just pour in the rest of it. And once again, just using your fork, just help it absorb that bit of water. And before you know it, you formed yourself a keto low carb amazing dough, perfect for a borreca pie, perfect for borrecas even, or for a tapada. You can make some delicious spinach and cheese borrecas or eggplant and cheese, and these will still be low carb. You can make them in borreca form or of course in pie form like we're doing today. So I just cleaned off my fork, scraped off my bowl, and just very gently, without overworking this, I just shaped this into a ball. And then once we have the shape of a ball, we're just going to take it and we're going to put it right back into that same bowl. And then we're just going to let it rest. We're going to take some paper towel. We're just going to cover our bowl lightly and we're going to allow it to rest. I'm going to set a 15-minute timer to allow that dough to rest and be ready to work with. So after 15 minutes, you're just going to uncover your dough, and then you're going to take a long, thin knife, and you're going to divide your dough ball into 2 parts, one for the top, one for the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of those halves, and the other one we're just going to leave covered on our counter. Then you're just going to want to grab some wax paper, make a nice long sheet of it, and then you're going to roughly make this into a ball, and you're going to add it onto the wax paper and sprinkle on a little bit of that leftover keto low carb flour. You just want it on the wax paper, and you want a little bit of it on the dough itself, because what we're going to do is we're going to cover this dough with a second sheet of wax paper, and that's going to help us stretch out our dough. So notice I'm using my fingertips, the hard part of my hand, and a rolling pin to stretch this dough out. You just turn the dough as you go, and you want to make this long enough to cover the bottom of your 9 by 13 inch baking dish. So once you feel it's big enough, what you can do is you can bring over that baking dish and you can just gently place it over the dough to make sure it's big enough. So yeah, that looks good. You want it to go up the side. So this piece should be rolled out a little bit bigger than the top piece that we will be doing next. So then gently just remove the wax from the dough itself, and then just pat down any little pieces that try to lift as you pull off that wax. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring over our baking dish. We're going to flip this right into our baking dish. And yes, you guessed it, we're just going to gently remove that other layer of wax paper. And then what we have is this amazing keto low carb dough, which is crazy good. And you're just going to use your hands and your fingers to just stretch it out and bring it up the sides of your baking dish. Now, don't worry if you have a little hole here or there. You can literally just take off a little piece from one area, pinch it, put it onto another. This dough is super forgiving and easy to work with. So once you're happy and you've lined the bottom of your pan with dough, you're going to bring over your artichoke, egg, and cheese mixture, and you're going to add the whole thing right on top of the dough. And then you're going to use your spoon to spread it out, and then you'll use the back of your spoon to kind of smoothen it out. You want it to all be the same thickness throughout. So you're just going to smooth that out well. And then what we're going to do is we're going to repeat that same process with the other half of the dough, because we want to create our top layer for our tapada, because tapada, after all, means covered. So it wouldn't be a tapada if it weren't covered. So I'm just repeating the same process: wax paper, a little bit of that keto baking flour, a little bit on top of the ball itself, flattening with my hands, with my fingertips, the hard part of my palm, stretching it out, rolling it out with my rolling pin. And then once it's big enough, I just peel off the wax paper, turn it right over, right on top of my delicious artichoke and cheese pie. And then I'm just going to gently peel off the wax paper and leave that beautiful dough right on top. So notice how I just smoothen it out with my hands. You're not going to notice any of this once it bakes. It's just going to be perfectly flat and gorgeous. So what I like to do is come in with a long, thin knife, and I cut off any excess dough. And then this dough, of course, can help me patch up if there's a little hole here or there. You just grab a little piece and just place it right on top. You're not going to believe it. You're not going to see it at all once it bakes. It's just beautifully flat and uniform. It'll look absolutely gorgeous. So then I do that all around. And then finally what I do is I use my index finger or my thumb, whichever is more comfortable. And then I just go along the inner edge, the entire perimeter of the baking dish. See how I did the index because it was closer to me, but on the sides, I use my thumb. Whatever works for you is fine, either one. And then you're just going to create this little fluted edge all around. Then I use a moist paper towel to wipe off all my fingerprints, any oil residue from the edge of my baking dish. I beat an egg in a bowl, and then using a pastry brush, I want to give this top layer of dough a nice coating of this egg wash. It's just beaten egg straight up. I don't add any water or anything to it. And then I just coat all of the top dough, including that inner fluted edge. Then either sesame seeds or Parmesan cheese. You can top it with either one. Today I'm going with sesame seeds. Sometimes I do Parmesan. Whatever you prefer works perfectly. Then you grab a long, thin knife, and we want to vent this top crust. So what I like to do is to give it about 6 cuts along the top. I did 4, and then here's number 5. number 6. I just make a pretty little pattern, make it look pretty, because of course we eat with our eyes first. And this is looking gorgeous and ready to go in the oven. So you place it on a center rack, and then you want to set a 30-minute timer to begin the cooking process. But after 30 minutes, it's not going to be fully cooked yet. What you want to do is you're going to pull it out 30 minutes into the cooking process, and it's already looking and smelling delicious, but the inside is not fully cooked yet. So what I like to do is I like to kind of score it, kind of slice it now. It just makes it easier when it's time to serve it later. But this, as I said, is optional. You don't have to do this part if you don't want to. You can just slice it once it's fully baked. That's fine too. And for starters, I'm cutting it into 12 pieces. They're probably going to be pretty big slices, so I may decide to cut those in half after it's fully baked and get 24 pieces instead, but that's totally optional. You can do 12 or 24. Then you want to cover your tapada, your borreca pie, for the rest of the baking process, because we don't want to burn that beautiful crust. So you're going to place it back in the oven, and you're going to set a 20-minute timer at the same temperature, 350, to finish the baking process. And after those 20 minutes, you're going to pull it out. It is smelling incredible. I cannot wait to see it. And look at how absolutely beautiful it is. You see that gorgeous top that we chose to sprinkle with sesame seeds. As I said earlier, it's beautiful with sesame or with a sprinkle of Parmesan on top, or you could even do a combination of both. It's absolutely beautiful no matter what you sprinkle it with. It is gorgeous and it smells incredible, full of cheese and artichoke. You can't go wrong. And can you believe that is a low-carb keto dough? That is crazy. You are going to not believe it when you taste it, that this is low-carb. If somebody served this to me and didn't tell me that this is a keto low-carb crust, I would think it's a regular tapada and borreca dough. It's that good. It's remarkable how similar to the original dough it is in texture, in flavor, in color, in everything. And it is keto, low carb. So think of the possibilities of making tapadas and borrecas with this amazing, amazing dough. I think my grandmothers would be quite proud. I'm going to make sure to link all the other filling options in the description of this video, because there's so many different options that you can fill this with, and all of them are going to be amazing. Look at how gorgeous this is, filled with artichoke. Imagine this with spinach and cheese, eggplant and cheese. Oh my goodness, I'm drooling just thinking about all of the amazing options. And with a keto low-carb dough, you cannot go wrong, and you won't miss the carbs. It is that crazy good. Okay, enough with the admiring. It's time for me to take a bite of this, but I just want to show you real quick up close. Look at how golden that crust is and that fluted edge. It's unbelievable that this is a low-carb dough. We've made a low-carb keto tapada borreca pie. I'm telling you, I think my grandmothers would be so proud. And as you saw, I cut it in 12, but I could very much cut this in half and serve 24 pieces instead, because this is quite a big slice. But hey, it's really yummy, so don't judge me if I decide to eat it. And it is keto low carb after all, so I'm not doing any damage. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. This is so yummy, so tasty, and so different. By going with this artichoke filling, I really wanted something different. I didn't want to repeat the same fillings that I've done with my regular tapadas, and this works. And look at that delicious crust, how beautiful, golden and crispy it is. It's unreal. This is so tasty. And I have to convince myself that this is keto. I know I made it myself, but this is a low carb dough. Like, how on earth is this possible? This flour is really unreal, and the results, amazing. And as I said, the possibilities for different fillings is endless. It's just absolutely delicious. And I'm thinking of all the different flavor varieties I'm going to be making, and just how yummy. Look at that cheese pull and just how yummy they're all going to be.
So once this cools completely, you will actually be able to pick this up and eat it by hand. It just stays together beautifully because we use that egg and that cheese to bind the artichoke. So tasty, absolutely delicious, warm, delicious room temperature. You can even eat this cold. And yes, I went ahead and cut the rest of it into smaller pieces because that's quite a big chunk I served myself. But no judgment, it's super tasty. So if you want to go with big pieces, that works too.
So, how crazy good does this keto low carb artichoke and cheese borreca pie, aka tapada, look? I know it's a mouthful, but let me tell you, you're gonna want a mouthful of this because it is so tasty. And you saw the dough comes together super easily. It's very, very workable. It doesn't fight you at all, stretches beautifully, creates that gorgeous crust on the top and on the bottom. I'm actually gonna throw in a little side note. In my family, tapada is what we created today. Tapada in Spanish literally means covered. And so when we make this with only a crust on the bottom and we leave the filling exposed, in my family we call that a tapada destapada, which I know makes no sense. It literally means a uncovered covered. But anyway, I digress. Back to this particular tapada. It is so tasty, so flavorful, and it's keto, low carb. So, as I said earlier, the sky's the limit. You can fill this with so many different fillings. So, I'm going to be sure to attach the link to the playlist where you can find the other tapadas to get other filling ideas in the description of this video. And of course, be sure to look out for my artichoke dip. If you're a fan of artichoke, you're going to love that one. That one I make in a bread bowl, so there's nothing low carb about it, but you can make that dip in a regular baking dish, and it is absolutely delicious if you want to keep it low carb. It's also phenomenal. And I want to take a moment to thank you for being here today, for watching my video. And if you've enjoyed today's video, please be sure to go over, subscribe, touch the little notification bell, because you're going to see I have tons of recipe videos out, hundreds of them at this point. And I know there's a lot of stuff there you're going to enjoy. And I'm constantly putting out more videos. So be sure to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out when I put out new content, which I do all of the time. And of course, if you're not following me on social media, please be sure to follow Sally That Girl in the Kitchen on Facebook, Instagram, and on Pinterest. And you can find me as Sally That Girl FL on X, Snapchat, and on TikTok. You can also find me on Threads as Sally That Girl in the Kitchen. I've also got my Amazon shop. That's amazon.com/shop/ Sally That Girl in the Kitchen. And basically, I'm all over the place. Just look up Sally That Girl in the Kitchen, and I know you will find me. And you want to follow because you want to make sure you're not missing out on any of the sneak peeks that I like to give every so often, and just little tidbits that I share there that I don't necessarily share here. So be sure you're following. So once again, I just want to thank you so, so much for watching. I'll see you next time.
Sally That Girl in the Kitchen.